Hello, welcome to another episode of Splitting Smart, where we get to have candid and super informative discussions with divorce and well-being professionals. So our goal is to provide you with the knowledge on various modalities of support that can help you to unhitch with fewer hitches and support you through life's transitions. I am Lila Aiken Ali, a mom and a divorce coach and the founder of Split FYI. And I am super thrilled to be having this conversation today as we will dive deep into self-love and what that means. You know, a feeling that is fundamental for our well-being, yet challenged and ignored in so many ways. We're having this conversation with the lovely Kerry Rasenberger, a life coach whose passion is to impact women's lives with empowerment and motivation to work through life challenges that they are facing, and so that they actually can find some happiness and true love. Welcome, Kerry. I am so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much. So glad to be here. It's appreciate it so much. Thanks.
I also wanted to say this, that your Instagram feed is like a dose of joy every single day for me. And I know for many, many others. And I think we should celebrate not only that you provide that through your Instagram, but what you provide for women. I would love to celebrate that. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much. That means the world to me. It's, I do it because I want inspiration and helping, women get through some hard times.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, so tell me a little bit about, what inspired you to start, doing what you do and doing it well.
Well, well, I guess to get into the self-love coaching, like many other women, I've suffered so many difficulties in my past and, difficult life challenges, brutal breakups, toxic, abusive relationships, which kind of stems from my childhood. My dad was a very well-educated man, electrical engineer, but he liked that bottle and was an alcoholic, abusive bottle. So when it starts as a kid, you don't really know what's different. It's kind of your comfort zone. And that's a funny term to say that's a comfort zone, but what you get used to is what you know. So being in those type of relationships, you go to another one and when you're in a toxic relationship, you start losing your self-worth, your self-love, it just drains you, it brings you down. And so kind of from that, getting emotionally hitting bottom, I was just like, there's no way I'm putting up with this again. I am going to find myself. I am worthy. I am going to do it. I am going to figure out how to love myself again and how to care for myself. And from that, I've really learned once you do that, you have so much more to give the world. You're in such a happier place, so much contentment. It's great.
Right. And it in what you says like rings true. We really do. And we say this a lot, but I think it doesn't resonate with someone because we don't stop and stop to really reflect that we do really recreate things that even were toxic in our lives. Like, it's crazy how that is so comforting to us to do, right? We're like, well,
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I have so many clients that they're repeating the same patterns over and over, what they saw as a kid, and they got PTSD from it, or complex PTSD. And when they were a child, they might freeze. And so, when somebody gets angry or rages, and you go into the same patterns, and as adults, until you realize it, you don't know what you're doing. You're repeating the same until you break these cycles and learn and be aware of yourself. And one of the biggest thing I think being aware of is starting to love yourself again. And when you love yourself again, or love yourself for the first time, that can be for many people, there's some wonderful things you start setting up and that you will not put up with. And you learn to respect yourself, and you learn to set boundaries and to say no and put yourself first for once. And I work with a lot of women, and seeing them develop and grow into this incredible person that they already were, but to discover it, it's beautiful when they are empowered to start saying no and to start putting themselves first. It's awesome.
And would you say, this is often, and I come across this quite a bit too, that the relationships that they had in their younger years aren't necessarily always with a parent it could be any, it could be a teacher, it could be any relationship that you felt like you needed to prove yourself or you needed that validation from, because, and then you started, right? It's a little bit of
Oh,
that.
it doesn't have to be a parent. You're so true.
Yeah.
You could have a teacher, and let's say it's a 13-year-old girl has a teacher, a male teacher that she trusts and loves, but then she starts looking for validation, and he starts having some narcissistic traits of taking advantage of that, and you can get abuse from that time for emotional struggle, psychological struggle. So really, it doesn't have to be a parent to start off from the beginning. It could be a sibling, it could be a relative, it could even be a best friend you trust that breaks everything down.
Right.
So you're totally right. It could be. It could be
Right.
a sports coach,
Yeah.
anybody that they
I mean,
cross.
often that
Mhm.
is, that there is this, it's a hangover with a relationship that you feel like you were never good enough in, and
Exactly.
that you were controlled, right? So to speak. And so there is, and then it becomes that, oh, I recognize this. Oh yeah, this is where I belong. And I'm going to recreate it in the relationships that I have moving forward. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, and you don't even realize that a lot of times. I don't even think you realize that you're recreating it. It's
Mhm.
patterns that you developed of you aren't getting validated from that person, and then they might give you a little breadcrumbing of making you feel good. Those terms I'm giving you,
Yeah.
and you start feeling good, so you work harder to be a people pleaser, you work harder, to avoid, conflict, you work harder, and you start picking up all these bad traits in your life that you start carrying over to to adulthood. And really, a lot of times the clients I work with, they are first discovering the issues that they've carried, in adults, like late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Hmm. It's so, can you walk me through, and I know you have a gamut of clientele, age group, and we did
Right.
discuss that. And I'm sure the audience should also know that, I mean, it's anywhere from 20 years old to 60-year-old, because really,
Mhm.
that journey of self-love never stops. And so can you maybe give me some insight of what, if someone came to you, right, and is like, I'm, my relationships never work, or I completely fail in everything, and really self-loathing,
Mhm.
space. What is the first, like, what would be the first thing that you would try to navigate? And I know everybody's different.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up. Everybody is different,
Mm.
and everybody, we're all on our own journey, and we're all in a different place in our journey, okay? And so, but let's start with somebody that is just lost and is just totally unhappy in life, doesn't know anything, where they're going. Um, when I was struggling through my life and hitting rock bottom, I realized that I needed to start focusing in 5 areas of my life. And I kind of put self-love and compassion into one.
Mhm.
That's one. And then self-care, relationships, environment, and um which one am I missing?
Mhm.
Self-awareness. I knew I was
100.
missing one. But those 5 areas, it was so important. And I kind of started looking at devising what goes in those areas.
Right.
And I came up with some really deep questions to ask myself, and kind of made myself I don't like to say quiz because it's not a grading scale. It's
Mhm.
really for improvement. But I devised I'm calling it a happy life assessment. It goes with self-love. But
Mhm.
when I took that, and put it together for my own growth, I really saw, wow, my environment's wonderful. My home, my work environment, my self-awareness is okay. But when it came to self-care and self-love, I was like a 0 out of 20. and
Right.
and it was an aha moment. I'm like, wow, I really need to start focusing on, I don't say no to people. I'm always trying to think I can fix everybody else's problems. I always, want to do everything for everybody, put myself last, never even, I'm not even on my list of doing something for myself. And and there's so much more. There's like 120 questions to it. But realizing how much I did zero for myself,
Mhm.
that was such an eye opener of, wow, I really need to start loving myself. And when I say that, I first want to clarify self love. because I think our magazines and TV and shows kind of give it a bad rap of, oh, that person's selfish or conceited.
Mhm.
But if you look up in the old Oxford English Dictionary, which goes way back before some of this stuff, the meaning of self-love is really just regards for your well-being and happiness. And if it's your regards for your well-being and happiness, shouldn't that be everyone's number one thing on their list?
I know.
And,
I
and
know.
and I just want everyone to hear this. It's really just caring about your happiness and your well-being. And your well-being is your self-care, your, really diving in. When I say self-care, it's not just drinking your 8 glasses of water a day and working out. Self-care goes a lot deeper. When you're stressed, are you taking walks or finding a way to relieve your stress? Are you going to your doctor's appointments every year? Are you going to your dentist and getting your teeth clean? Are you brushing your teeth daily? I know that sounds kind of funny, but there's some people, are you flossing? Self-care is really has like 6 different areas, and that would be a whole nother podcast. I'm not going there,
Yeah,
but
yeah, we'll go there another time.
that's way too much. But the purpose of this is just understanding that self-love has, to me, it's like a big umbrella. And underneath self-love is being aware of your situation, what you're going through your breakup, being aware of your environment. If you're going through the breakup, in your environment, is that a nightmare for you right now? Is that the tug of war going between the relationship, the stress? Are things getting broken? I just know in situations of breakups, it can be that extreme. In your relationships, not only during your breakup relationships, but self-love is caring for your friendships, your family, other relationships. And, my question for everybody to think when I'm talking about relationship, it's the relationship with you too. Do you talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend with compassion? When you're going through that hard breakup and that inner critic comes out and it can be so mean and just take us down and rip us apart, are you learning to turn that around and talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend going through that, and telling yourself it's going to be okay? You're doing the best you can really do right now in this moment. And
Mm.
that's just what you have to worry about. Not in the future, not in the past. You're doing the best you can do. And telling yourself you're safe. Those are different things that to me is all part of the self-love umbrella.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, and I actually, no, it's funny because you touched point on that, I was going to, one of my questions and you beat me to it was
Oh,
really how important is your self-talk, right? And
oh,
people
so
underestimate it, but to the littlest things. I mean, I catch myself on the daily. Why did I just say that? Why did I be like, oh, you're so stupid. Oh my God, why did I do that? But even to like, why did I do that?
Mhm.
All these questions that we come up with that are negative connotation embodies negativity around us, right?
Exactly. Oh,
Whereas you could just be like, yeah, I did that, it's funny because I was laughing today. There's a lot of things going on in my business world that I was like, I'm taking on a new word. Instead of saying I'm stressed, I'm scared, or I'm fearful of this, I'm like, I'm excited. And even though it's a faking way of saying it, but I was like,
definitely.
that word alone has actually changed the way I feel towards what is happening to me.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because it's so true. Even when that inner critic comes up, and sometimes I work with clients and I'm like, name your inner critic. Because,
Mhm.
if you name it, it's instead of it controlling you, you're controlling it. And I have one client that names hers rump roast.
Love
you know,
it. I love it.
and we just crack up laughing. She, when we're in discussion, she'll be like, oh, that rump roast came out again today.
That is
But,
so
but
funny.
but whatever you want to name it, and
Mhm.
that's her I love it too, because it's her taking control. It's her saying, you aren't going to control me. And and when that inner critic comes out, first of all, are you starting to feel tension? Physically, are you getting tense? Because a lot of times we get feelings in our body before our brain goes like a little, that little mouse on that wheel, or the hamster, and
Mhm.
just goes all over the place. But if we can start noticing our physical things that are effects from our inner critic, like some people get heart palpitations, stiff neck. I can
Mhm.
get locked jaw. How about you? Do you get?
I just get really tense over here.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden my shoulders go up and I'm intense even more.
Yeah. And so a lot of times when the inner critic keeps coming out, we can start feeling that first and then name it. And then name what you're feeling to even take more control. If you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling helpless, okay, inner critic, you're making me feel worthless right now.
Mhm.
Put that, tame that inner critic down,
Right.
and I'm feeling worthless. Well, I'm going to sit with this worthless feeling, and I am going to, I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to work through it. But what I'd like to say is what you said, is even if you don't believe something,
Mhm.
and the more you say it, I am worthy. I am worthy. Do a shift in your thoughts, or
Mhm.
change that negative into a positive affirmation. And
Mhm.
just like what you were saying earlier, I am worthy. I am worthy. And when you start bringing that into your life daily, it becomes such a part of your life, and it turns into a belief. When you didn't believe it before, you will start believing it.
Yep.
So the next time you have, a challenge, and that doesn't mean we'll never have challenges again. That means doesn't mean our inner critic's not going to come out again. But the
Mhm.
more we learn to tame it, the better we can control it. So we aren't sitting days of it beating us up, and we're calling it out.
I really like this idea, and this notion of detaching yourself from your inner critic and
Mhm.
really giving it that name and that, that thing that's over there. I always think of that show, Ally McBeal. Have you heard of
Which one?
Ally McBeal?
Oh, I used to watch that back. That was a 90s show.
I know it shows us our age, but anyway,
No, but I loved it. I remember when I come
that,
home from
and
work
I
and I
think,
used to have to watch it. That was before we could record.
right, it's like you always you got to see what's going on in her head, and
Oh, I love that.
I mean, I love that, right? And it's so
Mhm.
true. And it's like she's giving it a sound, a music, like a song. She's giving
Yeah,
the scenario some kind of thing that is detaching from what is actually happening. And there is a certain detachment that you have to create for yourself, right? When these
exactly.
scenarios happen. Otherwise, we're giving it so much power because their words are powerful.
It is. And the crazy thing is that, I wish we would have learned when I was younger that so many of our thoughts are lies that we
Yeah.
create. And we just think that whatever our brain thinks, our brain's thinking this, oh, that's true. Oh, I should be jealous because of that situation. And learning really to understand what is true, with your thoughts and what's not is very powerful. And that could be a whole nother discussion that I could do a whole
Oh, yeah.
other podcast
We'll
on,
do, we'll
just
do,
learning
we'll do
that part. But
that. Mhm.
we can come back to that. I want to stay focused on the self-love, but all of this part of learning, to control your inner critic,
Mhm.
learning self-care, learning to set boundaries, implementing self-compassion, talking to yourself like a friend, you
Mhm.
know being open to self-discovery and awareness. To me, that is one of the most powerful things you can gain in life, because once you are really aware of what's true, it makes so much power. And all that fault you put on yourself, like going through a divorce and blaming yourself and beating yourself up over and over, when you can see the whole picture of what is really true, it
Mhm.
is relieving, and it lets you let go of some of that pain. There's a lot of pain to work through going through divorce, and
Oh,
there's a lot of struggle. But the more you can become aware and more mindful, and the more you're a coach too. What a lot of times I work with clients, the more you can bring yourself of thinking in the present, the easier life is. We can't change the past, and we can't. The past happened. And there's a great book I read, Loving What Is, from Byron Katie.
oh yeah, I love Byron Katie. That was one
She's
of the books I
awesome.
read during my divorce, and
Yeah.
it's
Which
interesting.
one? Which one did you read?
Yeah, loving what I think it
Love.
was her first book, right? It was her
Yeah,
first
yeah.
one. That was it.
And that's, for me, going through my struggles. It gave me, and this is what I hope everyone out there can obtain themselves. Reading that book, it really let me let go of my past. And one thing that she says over and over, and it took me a while to kind of feel through it, and I'm like, oh, finally, that really makes sense,
Yeah.
is if you fight with your past, its reality, you'll lose 115% every time. So no matter how much you go back and fight with your past and try to change your past, and I shouldn't have married him, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that, it's going to beat you up and just make your struggle even more painful. In what she's saying is that it's not that you have to like accept it, that it was good, that's not anything. You don't have to accept, you have to accept it happened. You have
Right.
to accept if any words you might want to put in, some might be some 4-letter words. but it happened and it was reality, so it was supposed to happen.
Exactly.
And letting it go and bringing you to the present, it relieves so much pain.
Yeah.
And it really helps the beginning, to me, in my healing process. It helps to let go of that past.
Yeah.
And the same goes of the future. When you're always going into the future and worrying the future, there's nothing you can do. I say this scenario all the time as an example. Let's say you're getting married, right?
Mhm.
And you're planning for your future. You can plan and you can do things, but the day of your wedding today, can you actually say what's going to happen?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So you can't make the future happen. You can
Yeah.
plan and do things. And it's always good that we're preparing to things to be good. But the future, you cannot do anything about it until that day.
You
And,
know, it's,
and what are you going to say?
no, not to interject, but this is something that I have to, before I forget to say, but
No, 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 please.
I had a client who shared, she's religious, and she has shared a funny joke about the future tripping, she's like, well, in the religion, in the Christian world, we say, yeah, it's a joke. Like, you want to see God laugh is when you ask him, or you tell him your plans.
That is kind of true.
How
That's
do you
just
make
kind of
God
like,
laugh?
that's
You
kind
tell
of
him
like,
your plan. You tell him your plans, because
it's,
what plans? Like, hey.
I love that because it's so true. It's exactly what, and so that's why, for anybody out there, part of working on self-love, something that's really good tip is bringing yourself back to present,
To present,
to
just be in
present.
the moment.
Just
Also,
live in the moment,
yeah,
enjoy, and if it's a moment that's not good, then live in that moment that's not good. Cry your eyes out. Let that feeling, let that pain come through, because I'm going to tell you one thing. When we avoid the pain and we ignore it and pretend it didn't happen, our struggles and everything only intensifies and gets 100 times worse. And so work through that pain, because really what struggling is, to me, it's a pain that we have never resolved. It's a past, it's a hurt that has never been healed. And so until we work through those pains and feel those feelings, through a divorce, there's so many feelings. You can feel abandonment, you can feel isolated, you can feel neglected, embarrassment, helpless, worthless.
worthless.
What else would you want to add? The list
I
would
mean,
kind of go along what people
you
can
hit
feel.
most of it. The laundry list is really long. I mean, there's so many negative emotions that come with divorce, right? Failure is, top of the list of, you failed at something is what everyone feels, right? Like,
Right.
you had this contract, this endeavor in this world, and you're like, I failed at it. That's so number one, you're top over here. And then it's like all the things that come with failure, right? And it's because this leads to a great conversation that I would love to have with you around, and I know that you work with women, and oftentimes in our community, especially, you'll have, women and men, but both sides, but they come up against, a toxic person while
Yes.
they're going through a divorce, before they're even going through a divorce. And that stirs up a lot of fear. And so they're up against, and they've been beaten down. If you think about it, it's like if they're with a toxic person, and, 10 out of 10 times they have a feeling of self-worth that's really low, right? So how,
Totally.
walk me through a little bit of that, because I know that is kind of your wheelhouse here. Like, I know you're really good at this part.
Yeah. This is the hardest part of the beginning of this process,
Mhm.
is being aware of what's really true.
Right.
And awareness, first of all, when you have a toxic person you're living with, you take many times that it's my fault. You try to fix it. I can fix them. You live in false hope, and you live in, it's kind of a desperate, your heart sunk, you want this to work. I've
Mhm.
seen women that are in tears and they're feeling hopeless, that they have no chance of working. And when it comes to the awareness, which is really the first hard step, is the awareness. If someone has a lot of narcissistic traits. And I can't define somebody of narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not a psychiatrist. However, I can talk about the traits. And
Mhm.
if somebody has a lot of the traits, they aren't going to change.
Right.
And that's the first awareness and acceptance of working through who you with are not capable of changing. They aren't going to change. And anything that can happen right now is you changing for yourself,
Mhm.
loving yourself, learning to set boundaries. So that's kind of the first step, is aware.
Mhm.
And that can be depending on where the person is in these situations. You can live many years and not even realize what you're dealing with, because they are masters. They're master manipulators. They could have charisma on the outside. In front of other people, they could look like, oh my gosh, isn't he the best husband? And things can be all behind the doors. In their gaslighting, they can make you feel that you're the one that's crazy. You're the one that it's your fault. You're too sensitive. You're the one with the problem. I don't have it. What's your problem? It's a lot of that. So, this is really kind of complex, but to make it more simple, the first part is awareness.
Mhm.
What's going on in the relationship? How do you feel when you're with them? Are you stressed,
Yeah.
tense? Are you having triggers when they yell?
Mhm.
Or sometimes I have a woman, like a woman client, and she can say, I can get a look by them, and I just freeze,
Right.
because it's that controlling. And I
Yeah.
want people to listen. And if you don't have this experience, it's hard to understand. But
Mhm.
what they're saying, and I've been there myself, it is that controlling. And
Yeah.
people that haven't been in that experience, it's hard for them to understand. So awareness is the first step, okay? In understanding how you're feeling. Are there triggers? What triggers you, from the past? Going through what we mentioned briefly before,
Right.
what you feeling physically. How do you react? Are you freezing? Are the fight, flight, freeze,
Right.
on those of
Yeah.
PTSD? How are you experiencing? Some burst out back, some stay frozen, and they can be frozen and kind of helpless for a day or two. It's that extreme. And so we work with that. And once we start getting through the awareness, the feedback I get is so beautiful. It just makes me want to hug everybody that, they feel that so much has been taken off of them, to understand, wow, all these years, it's really not me. And
Mhm.
it's not, and when you have somebody with such extreme traits, and then we move on to the phase where this is my favorite part, because we're getting into diving into the self-love,
Mhm.
self-care. And a lot of times I'll have them, a lot of these women have not really been taking good care of themselves in every which way, emotionally, physically, psychologically,
Absolutely.
health, period. And so what I like them to do is to make a big sign of capital YOU, and have
Mhm.
you wherever they can do it, that they aren't going to feel uncomfortable of, if somebody else is around, that where they don't
Right.
have to explain it. Or we'll even talk about maybe having pop-ups on the phone every day.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
little reminder. So when they're totally getting sucked into their unhealthy past habits, they're
Mhm.
getting that reminder to focus on you.
Yeah.
And then we work on action plans. There's this is so complex, because there's areas to get in to work on shame. Shame is a huge area, which gets into negative core beliefs, the basic, I'm helpless, unworthy.
Yeah.
And then the guilt, working through that. But you is, I just love you. That's just like, what can you do? What do you want to do for yourself? What are little things that make you happy? What's something that you can put in your daily schedule? um, Journalizing is phenomenal to help with self-love, to get
Mhm.
your feelings out, to talk about, what is beautiful about yourself. um, and sometimes I will give a scenario, and I'll have my client talk to me. It's their scenario, but I'm giving it to them, and,
Mhm.
saying their best friend, and have them talk back to me. What would they say to their friend? And it's amazing how much they realize the compassion that they haven't been giving themselves.
Yeah.
Little exercises like that. Or when they're going through a painful time, journalizing about the painful time and getting
Mhm.
that pain out. I mean, for me, I think journalizing is phenomenal. How about you?
It's one of my, it's my go-to in
Mhm.
everything, in every which way. And sometimes it's about my mental health. Sometimes it's about your just stuff that's happening. Sometimes it's about my wish list, of things or what I want to create. It's that place. It's like my little home, that place
Yeah.
that it takes me away to for me, myself and I. And in fact, what I was hearing a lot about what you were saying and the things that you do with your clients is really, it's essentially also getting them to identify themselves with themselves. Like,
Exactly.
what I love about what you're, and what I heard you're saying is like, how important is it that we identify ourselves, especially when you're married,
Mhm.
the married woman, as the wife, as the mother, as the, we are always labeling ourselves or as the best friend or as this. And, it's like, how do we identify with ourselves? And you can only get there if you're doing with the things that you're encouraging your clients to do are so important to get there, to figure it out.
Well, and it's so important because, after we work on you, we work into recovery and the healing, and it's also learning about what is a healthy relationship because
Mhm.
they haven't been in one. And a healthy relationship of having respect for each other, respecting each other's boundaries, being able to have an argument that you can compromise,
Right.
you know, respecting if somebody needs silence, allowing that, having, just, and that's what's important after these relationships and even going through, the divorce breakups, you lose so much. And what's important is to start working on and even asking my clients, what do you value? And a lot of times in the beginning, I don't know. Well,
Yeah.
that's okay. You don't know. Let's work it out.
Yeah.
Let's work on start of what do you even like? What's
Mhm.
important to you? And a lot of times I'll do little, I'm like, at home, here's what you're going to do until next session. 7 minutes, no overthinking, no nothing when you're in the room, and just write down as many things as you can write that you like. And then let's go back and we'll talk about that. Which one of these are values, which are important to have in your life and for your future relationship to set up. And that is something that, no, if that is a value that is so important and the other person can't respect it, then maybe that's a red flag in the future that
Right.
you learn like, oh, this just isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's like, it's
it's getting clear
right.
who you are, which,
Mhm.
this word, and I use this a lot in a lot of things lately, because, if I were to say, what is the feeling I wish I had, when I woke up every morning, is clarity. Like we all strive for ultimately this, a clear line of what we need to do, our goals, our things, like what
Yeah.
makes you feel good, not meshed up with the construct of the world, not meshed up with what society is telling us, but what makes us tick? What makes me tick? What makes you tick? What is it that's going to make me go to bed tonight and say, ha, I feel good about me? Not like, okay, I can't control what happens in a day and all the things, but I can say I handled it well and I did well and I'm okay with it. Right. It's like that's where the thing that is so hard to obtain. And listen, even when you're enlightened and you're working on this path, there are days that you're still going to be like, I'm really not clear, you know?
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
okay. I
okay.
mean, that's okay not to have clarity sometimes. That's all part of the growing process. But I love what you said, getting to know yourself. But I think it's also not only getting to know, but getting to accept yourself and
Yes.
being comfortable in your skin, accepting your strengths and your weaknesses and everything in between. And I'll tell you, I got a million things in between
Yeah.
strengths and weaknesses. I got like balance, but being comfortable with that and being okay that I got a lot of weaknesses and I don't mind sharing them because I'll hire somebody to help me with my technology, what I
Right.
mean, or things like that. And learning to being okay with who you are is a huge part of self-love and self-growth. And also it really helps you not worry about what other people say. And
Yeah.
that is something that controls so many people. And especially when we're at such a low going, through a breakup or in a toxic
Mm.
relationship, we're beaten up, to some degree, we're beaten up. Some others extreme and, but to some degree we all are.
Yeah.
And not worrying what other people say and being comfortable in our skins because the only validation you need in life truly is yourself.
Wow.
that took me a long time to learn. When I was
Yeah,
in my 20s, I was looking for validation everywhere with people.
everywhere.
How
Everywhere.
about you?
Well, if you think about it, it's kind of the construct of our lives, right?
It
Because
is, yeah,
that's where we're put in a school that grades you. I mean, we're
exactly.
graded in every step of the world. Like you can only get into a sports thing if you make it in there. If you only can do this, if you you thrive, you get in the top schools only if you can get there with your. I mean, it's a constant challenge. You get the best, you get a great career because okay, well, you have to work really hard to do that. Oh, fine, and that's
Mhm.
okay. But that is our construct. So it's
It
kind of
is.
going up against it when you're talking about your relationship with yourself. It's everything against all of that.
It does, and it's a hard thing to learn because you're exactly right. I mean, it's not what we learn in school. It's not what we were brought up. It was always be nice to everybody. Oh, you can't get angry. You
Do
can't
this.
coach it. Like with my parents, they're really old. I mean, my father comes from the generation of don't show your feelings, like don't feel. And my poor brother wasn't allowed to feel anything because you're a man. and,
Right. Right.
and so it is a new way of thinking, but it's so important.
Yeah.
And I tell you, when you get to thinking this way, and this is your life is so much more beautiful. And you have, you aren't judging others either.
Right.
And,
Mhm.
and you're more curious with others, and the competition subsides. I'm not talking about going after a business deal and you're competing against with the other company. I'm talking about with yourself, and
Yeah.
who you are. And so those are really, just really important.
Well,
And I'm
everything that you've said, I cannot, well, not only agree with, but I've learned a lot in this conversation because it kind of solidifies the things that I've been thinking. Sometimes I don't put into action. And as you were talking, I was like, oh God, I could probably use a little bit of self-care right now. And we all
yeah.
have to check in. It's like it's for every evolution of your life, you're always going to have to stop and be like, okay, what am I doing? Why am I feeling this way? And I don't do that enough sometimes for my own self. And so, and especially as a parent, we talked about this before we got on
Mhm.
live, we were sitting there saying, it's like, you kind of get lost in being that parent role. So to make that time for yourself to be like, okay, I need this time for me, myself, and my mind, give me time and space. It's harder to do, but it's essential, right?
It's,
What
and
I'm
I'm
hearing.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I feel, especially for parents, you feel guilty that you can't, especially when they're younger, you feel guilty you can't have time alone. And I was terrible with that. I was always feeling like I was at their beck and call, and I shouldn't have been. I am just as worthy to have the time when I need it. And if I took that time, I would have come back into the situation an hour later and been more beautiful at the way I handled their things instead of
Totally.
being stressed, or instead of,
Right.
being tense,
Right.
or got to do this.
Or in
And
fear mode.
I love that you brought that up, because having the space and knowing when you need quiet time or meditation or a walk in the woods or just time by yourself is it's critical,
And it puts the stuff, it puts that energy back in the bucket of yourself. Like you need that.
Yeah.
You need to fill it up so that you can show up for other people. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I think people I work with struggle with is that it's that time and space for themselves and their mind to really figure it out, and also to feed themselves with that, knowing like I can have time for me, I'm okay with that, and don't be afraid of it. It's essential. Even if you're thinking crazy thoughts, it's okay. Be honest with yourself, because that will go back to this feeds into actually the last thing I really want to discuss, because I
Excuse
know
me.
time is, we got to wrap it
Yes.
up. But I really, really want to talk about, that trusting yourself. So that kind of all feeds into the ultimate and penultimate thing that, especially when you're going through a breakup,
Right.
especially when you've been in a toxic relationship. And
Mhm.
I hear all the time, how did I not see this? How da, 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 da. Like, and then you don't trust yourself, right? So can we just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think trusting yourself goes with the whole process of self-love, awareness, getting to know yourself. And it's really believing in yourself again. And so to do that, sometimes it's really hard, and,
Mhm.
and it's a struggle. But I'm a big person in baby steps. I feel that if you try to do too much at once, you're going to fail at all. So doing little steps of start paying attention to your gut feeling
Mhm.
and notice your gut feeling, because more than likely your gut feeling is right.
Mhm.
unless you have some irrational fear, like scared of spiders or something like that.
Yeah, right,
But,
right.
but it's telling you it's right. And really start tuning in to what your gut feeling's telling you to do, and listening to it. So if that moment's not right, don't do it, you
Mm,
know? Don't do it. If you start getting a feeling, start listening.
yeah,
And I would probably do awareness with a client. If, okay, this week, and we're going to focus on just your gut feelings. And
mhm,
when you start getting a gut feeling, start jotting it down. And
yep,
then we're going to talk about it. And how did you respond to that gut feeling? Because being aware of your gut feelings, a lot of times we don't even know. And, especially if we've been beaten so long, of our soul's been beaten down, we
yeah.
don't know. So just start working on, tuning into it and writing down how you reacted. And how often does that gut feeling come up? Is it telling you the same thing over and over? If it's doing it, your inner self is telling you, hey, beware. This is like, a red flag. Take care of yourself. That's one way. And then also doing little things, like if you aren't comfortable talking with people, then try to step out and do little things. Maybe not go into a group, maybe do a meetup session of a club or something that you're interested, that has a small group.
Yeah.
And then start working and talking with people you don't know in a small group. That's learning to trust yourself,
Yeah.
learning to believe in yourself. And there's a lot, everybody's individual how they handle it. Those are just a few suggestions.
Oh, those are
Uh,
great
yeah,
suggestions.
any suggestions that you would?
No, and I actually, to that point, we have, it's split FYI, we have
Yeah,
coffee talk and an SOS group, and you know
right,
support groups where you see that people come in and the difference, of their demeanor, of the way they are, their confidence level, just like three, times in, they're coming in and they're like all of a sudden getting, because they're being heard,
right.
right?
That's important.
And they are also allowing themselves time to hear other people, be heard, and also conceptualize and understand what everything is being said, which is really important. So I can't stress enough, because I see it firsthand, how important it is to like join whatever it is, even if it's like a hiking group or it's a whatever group, but
Mhm,
be a part of something that's small and attainable, that really allows you to see how you're showing up,
mhm.
right? For yourself and
Exactly.
with others. So I like that. I really like that group thing. And I think that trusting, as you were saying, kind of tuning into your inner self. I always say this, and I can't remember where I read it or heard it, but it was like tune in, tap in, and turn on, right? It's like tune into yourself, tap into all of, what's going on, and then turn it on, like turn on that, that inner self, and that understanding that is alive. It might have been dormant for a
Awesome.
while, but
Mhm.
it's alive, and now it's alive, and now it's going to really figure out, not in a way that is like you don't trust anybody, but that you can now recognize the things that you're like, no, I don't think I need to be doing this. That's not what I like or I want, because now I know me. And that's part of, like you said, it's like a whole
It is. It's
all
awesome.
convoluted thing. It's but one thing at a time, right? And I
Right.
feel like the trust, why I spoke about it last, was because, with you, it's because that is the ultimate goal, right? To trust yourself.
It
And
does.
but to get there is the baby steps that you have to take, and it all leads into one another, right? So
And I love that you brought trust up, because to me, I think trust is one of the most important things to have in yourself, because once you have it, you're comfortable with setting boundaries, not feeling guilty. You're comfortable of living more in the present. You don't worry about the past. You're comfortable being around other people. And it just gives you so much. You have the ability to say no and not feel guilty for it. And then you also, when you trust yourself, when to accept your responsibility when you do something wrong. I think that's healthy, and we all need to do it. But also trusting yourself, you aren't going to take on the other person's responsibility of what they did wrong.
exactly. a
And
hundred
that's a huge thing, where people in toxic relationships and going through divorce, I think a lot of them, go through a phase, many of them do, where they're accepting the responsibility that it's all their fault, everything's their fault. And when you start trusting yourself, you can balance it and, kind of understand, okay, well, I did that wrong. And that's great to accept what you did wrong.
right.
But, trusting yourself takes you everywhere,
Yeah.
making great decisions.
And by the way, you don't make great decisions out of nowhere. You have to make bad
Exactly.
decisions to get to the good decisions. That's just par for the course, okay? Like no one gets straight A's off the bat, it's like impossible. You really got to work up on that, so it's allowing yourself to have those failures, right? So
And also trusting yourself is also good, because I loved how you just mentioned failures. Trusting yourself is to be comfortable, to step outside your comfort zone,
uh-huh.
be okay to make a mistake, because we all make mistakes. It's in everyone's life. I haven't met anybody yet in life that hasn't made a mistake.
No.
And when you trust yourself, you're going to step out and you're going to grow.
I agree. Well, Carrie, this has been such a great conversation. I
Oh, I
would,
loved it.
because I mean, you're such an inspiration and everything you say resonates so well. Where can the audience find you? What's the best place to get in touch with you if they want to work with you? Where is, I know there's an Instagram handle, but I would let you tell
Sure.
everyone how to get, yeah.
Okay, well, my Instagram handle is Kerry, Kerry, life coach. And from there, I have Linktree, and that takes you right to my website, my coaching packages. And you can DM me there. And anybody that's listening, I'll give you a free session if you want, to see if we're compatible. To me,
Mhm.
it's always important to be compatible,
Mm.
with the life coach and vice versa.
Yes.
And check out my website. I'd love to hear you. And I'm also going to be in September rolling out a online course of finding happiness after a toxic relationship.
Oh,
And we will have group sessions every week. So we have community, and it'll be just for women. And I'm trying to keep my groups smaller so
mhm.
it's more intimate. And then there's trust, if people feel comfortable opening up.
Oh, fabulous. That is such a great resource. Thank you, Carrie, for being such a great resource, actually.
Thanks
Um,
for having me. I loved it.
you're welcome. Well, thank you guys for also joining us today. And you know where to find us, Split FYI. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and follow us for many more other amazing conversations. And our website is splitfyi.com. Thank you guys.